Thank you, Senator Hume. Senator Ruston.
I rise to second the motion. In doing so, Mr Acting Deputy President, can I congratulate Senator Hume and all other senators who are taking their seat in this chamber for the first time. There can be no greater honour than to serve your country in this place. Can I also take this opportunity, Mr Acting Deputy President, to acknowledge the large amount and diverse range of crossbenchers that we have in the Senate, and to note with some degree of satisfaction that it was the people of Australia who elected the Senate crossbench this time, entirely on the strength of your primary vote and not by some sort of backyard backroom deal, preference deals, as has been the case in the past. The crossbench is here because the people of Australia elected you, and I believe that this truly is a Senate of the people. Can I also acknowledge the uncontested re-election of Senator Parry as the President? I think it is a reflection of the extraordinary non-partisan way in which he has conducted this chamber in the 2 years over which he's presided over it. Can I also acknowledge the same manner in which the Deputy President of the 44th Parliament, Senator Gavin Marshall, took his role and the impartial way he conducted business in this chamber, and I certainly look forward to the new Deputy President, Senator Sue Lyons, to continue in that vein. In 2013, it was my privilege to deliver the address in reply to the Governor-General's opening speech in the 44th Parliament, and it is indeed an honour to second the motion in this new Parliament. Can I echo His Excellency's sentiments about the purpose of this Parliament? We must be responsible, we must be diligent, but above all, we must be sensible as we debate and implement this government's legislative agenda. And can I acknowledge the comments that have been made by many of the crossbenchers to date, indicating that it is their intention to undertake their role in this government in exactly the way that the Governor-General suggested that we should all behave. There is no senator in this chamber that's under any illusion that this must be a parliament and a term of delivery. We are a second-term government, and we intend to start this term ready to deliver on our election agenda. We're not going to shy away from scrutiny. However, the people of Australia rightfully can expect that we should be allowed to deliver the promises that we took to the election, and I'm glad to see that many of those opposite have already indicated that they intend to support us in doing exactly that. The Turnbull government, of which I'm privileged to be a member, stands ready to be judged on what we do and not on what we say. First and foremost, Mr Acting Deputy President, we have to address one of the great moral dilemmas of our time: intergenerational debt. As a generation, we are inflicting on our children and their children excesses of our own making. It is born of our own greed, and we must stop. We are racking up on the federal credit card a debt that we can only pass on to the next generation if we don't do something about the continued spending that is occurring. Worse still, Mr Acting Deputy President, the ultimate outcome of continuing to spend more and more year upon year upon year is eventually you'll end up going broke. One day we're going to wake up and realise that nobody's prepared to lend us any money anymore. The government of which I am a member stands ready to address this situation through its commitment to responsible fiscal repair and strong and stable leadership. Our policies are all focused on strengthening the economic growth while reducing our spending growth, and we need to make Australia more resilient to economic shocks. To achieve this, the Turnbull government has a plan and a detailed method of delivery. We are going to focus entirely on economic growth, both within Australia and in our export markets. Through our trade policy and initiatives, we intend to make sure that Australia is protected, because we are a very trade-exposed nation. We're never going to get rich selling to ourselves, so our focus must always be in ensuring that we have got adequate and lucrative export markets to which we can export our wonderful Australian produce. The importance of this cannot be understated for our rural and regional communities like the one that I come from. 67% of our exports are generated in our rural and regional communities outside of our capital cities, and for this reason we cannot underestimate the importance of ensuring that we have trade arrangements in place that will now enable our farmers and our primary producers to be able to sell their products not just in Australia but at the lucrative prices that we can get in the emerging markets, particularly those that are immediately to our north. That's why the free trade arrangements that were negotiated under the previous government are so terribly important, and we must continue to make sure that these trade arrangements are negotiated in the best interest of Australian producers. To that end, this government and the previous government of the 44th Parliament have been very focused on the development of agricultural policy. There is no doubt that Australia's competitive advantage in the international marketplace comes on the back of the fact that we are clean and green and safe a producer of primary produce. It is for that reason that we need to continue to maintain our competitive advantage, and our policy, our agricultural competitive white paper, is focusing very much on a number of initiatives which will deliver that security for our primary producers. We have a very strong focus on research and development and making sure that we continue to be the best producers in the world. In the case of biosecurity, we place a very high importance and level of importance on biosecurity and making sure that we are able to continue to protect that clean, green, safe image, because we all know with the high standards of living and compliance that we have in Australia, we are never going to be the cheapest producers in the world, but we certainly can continue to be the best producers in the world. We also, as part of our agricultural policy, are making sure that we have quick and adequate drought response. We acknowledge the changing climatic conditions that are occurring across Australia, and we need, as an agricultural sector, to be ready to respond to these changes, because we need, once again, to ensure that we're planting the right crops in the right places, but also to make sure that our farmers, when they go through times of great adversity that are not of their making, that we as a government stand ready to stand by our farmers to help them through some tough times. And lastly, one of the major platforms of our agricultural policy and more broadly our government policy is the provision of infrastructure. We cannot possibly hope to be able to get our farmers, our primary producers or our business sector to be able to realise the rewards and opportunities if we don't provide the infrastructure through which they can deliver them. We are very proud in the agricultural space of the amount of money that we're putting towards ensuring water security through our dams policies, but more broadly the Turnbull government believes that infrastructure, public infrastructure, economic infrastructure is a very strong basis and platform on which we need to build the economic growth and prosperity of this country. But to do so, we also need to be prepared to deal with issues like taxation reform. There is no doubt that everybody in this country would accept that everybody needs to pay their fair share of tax to make sure that we can continue to provide the level of public amenity that I think we've all become used to. Certainly, one of the areas that I think has been is very positive in the budget in 2016 was the addressing of the importance of small business. We all know that every large business was once a small business, and as the government of which I'm a member is very keen to make sure that we support all of our small businesses so that they can prosper and they can flourish, and hopefully one day they can be medium businesses and large businesses, or just be successful small businesses in their own right. For that reason, we increased the tax threshold from $2 million to $10 million for your eligibility to qualify as a small business. And we also undertook a number of other taxation measures in support of small business and their ongoing prosperity. But one of the other areas that is very, very important and constantly is of a concern to the Australian public is the amount of multinationals that seem to have the capacity to undertake tax avoidance and not pay the level of tax in Australia that we believe that they should. For that reason, the Treasurer was very clear about the importance of cracking down on multinational tax avoidance to make sure that everybody pays their fair share, and it's not just the little guy who gets to pay the majority or the lion's share of the taxation burden in Australia. Another platform of the Turnbull government in this 45th Parliament is going to be to break down the union's stifling hold on our economy and our society. And I say unions, we don't mean every union. There are certainly some very responsible unions, but if you have a look at the kind of activities that we have seen over the last little while with unions like the CFMEU and the unlawfulness on our building sites, I think every Australian has a right to expect better management and control of a part of our economy that employs over 1 million people and provides in excess of 8% of the gross domestic product of this country. And you've only got to have a look at the advertisement that is currently playing on the television to realise the lengths and extents that some of our unions are prepared to go to protect their position. I don't believe anybody in Australia, whether they're a union, whether they're a business or whether they're an individual, should be above the law. We saw in Victoria during the election campaign the disgraceful hold of the firefighters by their firefighting union in Victoria, and we stand ready to support the volunteer firefighters in Victoria by making sure that we pass legislation to protect their interests and to make sure that their interests are not being stifled or squashed out by a selfish union that is only interested in looking after its own members and not the safety of the community for which it's supposed to be protecting. Another example that occurred during the election campaign was the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal, where the government we were very pleased to be able to successfully abolish that tribunal, which once again was trying to destroy the small business, mums and dads businesses of the transport industry, owner-drivers. And so I think that if we to bring back into this place the ABCC and the Registered Organisations Bills, the introduction of the Emergency Services Volunteers Bill, the abolition of the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal all go towards making sure that unions are held to account to the same level as everybody else in Australia is held to account. Nothing can be as important as national security, but of course Australians have taken for granted for many, many years that when they go to bed at night they will be safe. And there was no greater example of that than this year's commemoration of the Anzac Centenary and the commemoration of the Battle of Lon Tan, amongst many other celebrations or commemorations that we've had this year that constantly remind us of the extents that those before us have gone to protect our safety. It is for that reason that this government places a massive level of importance on national security. To that end, my home state of South Australia has been a great beneficiary of the new continuous naval shipbuilding program, the $50 billion submarine program, which will directly sustain 1,100 jobs and an additional 1,700 jobs in the supply chain. In addition to that, there's a $35 billion frigate program, both of which provide not just national security benefits for the country, but they also provide long-term economic sustainability benefits for the country. Importantly, they underpin our education system by providing the opportunity and the reason for our education system to focus on providing and educating our young people for the jobs of the future. And a nearly $90 billion spend on shipbuilding provides a long-term opportunity for many young Australians who wish to undertake a career in this particularly high-tech industry and these very lucrative jobs. It is a whole-of-government, whole-of-economy initiative which will see Australia, and particularly my home state of South Australia, as great beneficiaries to a great and very important government program that's part of this government's agenda. It also fits in very well with the National Innovation and Science Agenda, once again underpinning the absolute necessity for Australia to continue to be the smartest, the most innovative and the most technologically advanced country in the world, because we are never going to be the cheapest. We are also, as a government, very focused on the fact that we have not only a large population base in the city, but there's 8 million Australians that don't live in our capital cities. As I said before, 67% of our export earnings are generated in rural and regional areas. To this end, the Turnbull government places a huge amount of emphasis on rural, regional and remote Australia. We have announced a $2 million regional jobs and investment package. We certainly are working towards improving the amount of, reducing the number of mobile black spots. The development of Northern Australia, one of the most underdeveloped areas of our country, and our $10 billion investment in the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, all of which go towards ensuring that rural and regional Australia has the opportunity not only to have the same benefits and opportunities as our cousins in the city, but because the economic opportunity and the growth opportunity that exists in rural and regional Australia is so great. Equally, the national broadband network has been focused, the rollout has been focused to a much greater degree into rural and regional Australia, and certainly we saw the launching of the Sky Muster satellites, so that people who otherwise have had no capacity at all to get access to high-speed connectivity are now able to get access at a similar rate to many of those that live in less remote areas. Can I say, in conclusion, that I can absolutely assure this parliament that their government always puts the customer first, Mr Acting Deputy President. When it comes to education, it's the children's interests that are primary. In our healthcare system, we focus on delivering the best outcomes for our patients. In agriculture, our policies strive to return better farm gate prices to our farmers. However, the ability to continue to pay for these much-needed and justifiably expected services is the reason that we have placed at the front of our economic agenda for the 45th Parliament budget repair. I know budget repair is not a particularly sexy thing to be putting at the front of your agenda, but I can assure you that unless we do something about the continuing increase in the debt and the deficit, we are not going to be in a position to be standing in this place and talking about all the wonderful things that are on the government's agenda to be able to support the Australian economy and to be able to provide the things that the Australian public want and expect, unless we've got a strong budgetary position and we've got reserves in the bank so that we are able to be more resilient, because there is no doubt, Mr Acting Deputy President, that we live in a time of great global uncertainty, and we're never quite sure what's around the next corner. We've certainly seen great unrest on the international front, but we've also seen political uncertainty, the uncertainty of decisions like Brexit. So Australia needs to make sure that we are prepared and so that we are resilient when international shocks come our way. So I would call on those opposite and ask them, please support us in our endeavour as we undertake what we believe is the absolute responsibility of government, and that is to repair the budget and to put us on a sustainable path so that we can continue to afford all of the things that we take for granted in Australia. We take for granted our high standards of living, and nobody's suggesting for a minute that we shouldn't continue to have those high standards of living, but they come at a price in the budget. We also need to recognise that we marvel in the fact that we have a world-recognised level of environmental protections occur in this country. Equally, they come at a price. We also need to be able to maintain our clean, our green and our safe image, which is our competitive advantage when it comes to exporting our primary produce to the rest of the world. To be able to do that, it comes at a price. Biosecurity is probably one of the most expensive things that a government needs to deliver. But we are absolutely and completely committed to getting our debt under control, for the simple and primary reason that we can no longer continue to spend the money of our children and their grandchildren. No responsible economic manager, whether it be in a business or when you are dealing with your family, there is no way that anybody here as a parent would be spending money and racking up a debt of which they expect their children to pay or their grandchildren to pay. I believe, Mr Acting Deputy President, governments should be exactly the same. We should spend within our means, and we should never, ever think that it's okay to pass on a debt of something that we've consumed in this time to a generation in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ruston.